What's up, castaways? Miles away here. So today I'm back with another synth review. Today we're going to be looking at this, the Behringer Neutron. It's a great little synth, packs a ton of value into a small package, and frankly it sounds freaking awesome. So dive in, remember to like and subscribe if you like this content, and let's take a look at what this thing can do. Alright, so we'll start off with an overview of this little synth. So it may be small, but it seriously packs a ton of features. So on the left here, we have our oscillator section. In the middle here, we have our filter section, then our modulation and envelopes, as well as routings to those envelopes modulation. And then at the top here, we have our delay, our analog delay. Underneath, we have our overdrive section. And then finally on the right here, we have some features for the Patchbay, including sample and hold, slew rate, and glide, as well as attenuators. Great. So let's start off here with the oscillator. So we'll fire up a basic patch here. This is just going to be a single sawtooth wave with no drive, no distortion, with the tone at 12 o'clock. This is a really bright sounding oscillator by default, but we can actually turn down the tone of the oscillator with the drive tone knob here. Get more of like a Mogi sounding oscillator there. Or if you even wanted something really kind of harsh and digital sounding on the other side. You might think that would sound terrible, but in fact, a lot of cases you want thinner oscillators. For example, if you were trying to make a lead or a pluck sound over top of something else, that extra ability to sequence in the brighter sound or the darker sound just with the tone knob is great. It is worth noting, and this may be a con for some, but the oscillators are actually always going to be routed through the drive and the delay by default. So you're always going to be getting essentially not a 100% dry signal path. If you do want to do that though, however, you can take some patch cables and route that out, which we'll show later. Cool, so mixing in one of the other oscillators here, let's go there. So the oscillator wave shape is variable between pulse all the way down to sine. Really cool. I don't normally see sine waves on analog synths, but you can hear how it morphs through them here. Really interesting sounding oscillators. I wouldn't say they sound quite as beefy as a Moog or quite as, clean as some of the Dave Smith stuff I've heard, but for the price, man, these are great sounding oscillators. Another big highlight for sure here is the fact that on the front panel, you've got pulse width. Really awesome sounding. I do find these oscillators have a really aggressive character, which means they're really great for kind of more upbeat, aggressive dance music, and also they sound great filtered down. So we're going to mix the two oscillators together here. So first con of the synth, you'll see here, these are the two oscillator tune knobs. I actually replaced the knobs with these two, these two here. I took off the small knobs from the filter drive and the output and took off the big knobs from the filter tune and moved them. Biggest con, I was getting so frustrated. I kept bumping these huge knobs on the tune area, and it just would constantly put my synth out of tune. So a tip, if you own this synth, the knobs screw off quite easily. Just pull them off and replace them. It'll save you a world of trouble because you don't want to be tuning your oscillators that frequently. And the filter cutoff knob should always just be big. That's a preference, and you know it's true. The filter cutoff knob should be the biggest knob on the synth. If they're not doing that, then what are they doing? But all jokes aside, so we've got our one oscillator here. We're going to make it a sawtooth. and then we're going to mix in our two oscillators together with this Osc mix knob. There's no dedicated mixer, but for a synth this size, you know, I'm willing to take that sacrifice because you don't really need one with just two oscillators here. It's sounding good. It's a bit finicky to tune them, but that's part of the fun, and they sound awesome. The reason why they sound so fat and warm is because they're always alive. You know, they're always having a bit of trouble to be tuned. But yeah, so here we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna try to dial in a patch with an octave above and an octave below. So we'll do that using the feet octave knob here. So similarly to how most synths will have a knob, the way this is laid out is a button. Awesome. One thing I will say is once you do tune them, unless you bump it, like I said, then they do stay really well in tune. I've had zero tuning problems with these oscillators. They don't even need time to warm up usually, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, which is so impressive for a synth this price. Great job, Behringer. There's also oscillator sync. And there's also a paraphonic mode. Let's tune these quickly. Paraphonic mode is really cool. I do wish more synths had this. Yeah, so as you guys can hear, the synths oscillators really have a very distinct sound. Let's tune that again. They sound super analog. They're super wild. Probably not the best if you're looking for a really precise sounding synthesizer, but they're awesome. They're wild, they're untamed, and they can get just absolutely destroyed with the filter, resonance, and distortion. So with that said, let's move on to the filter. Now, again, I think the filter alone on this probably justifies the price. It's a genuinely really high quality analog filter that is multiple state variable. Low pass sounds awesome. That's with no resonance. Let's crank the resonance. Like, that filter alone should not be anywhere near a synth this cheap. It's one of the nicest sounding low pass filters. I would probably honestly pick this over the filter on the Korg Prologue, which is, you know, at least 5 times as much money. When you get to full resonance, you do start to get some distortion here. Let's see if we can fix that in Logic. Yeah, you're getting that MS-20 style growl. Yeah, so the filter definitely is a highlight, and I haven't even touched the other 2 modes. I do find most of the time I just use the low pass filter because it's so integral to most of my sounds, and with the high pass being an option rather than an additional feature, I don't really find myself, you know, sacrificing the low pass for a high pass much, but it is there if you want. You tap the button. So first and foremost, we've got our high pass. It's a really nice high pass filter. You can get these crazy resonant peaks. Awesome. And then the bandpass is very interesting here. I do like bandpass filters. I ought to use them more. Sweet. So we'll leave it back in low pass mode for now because it is, in my opinion, the nicest of the 3. Awesome. So right underneath here, we do have a key tracking option. So what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to, the higher the note we play, it will basically open the filter up more and more per note, so that you don't really lose out on the high frequencies of higher notes while you're playing up an octave, whatnot. It just makes it easier to hear. I do wish it was a slider or a knob, because I find that, oftentimes with a button, you either have, yes key tracking or no key tracking, and that isn't always what you want. You want to dial it in, but it's there if you really want it. I find myself usually leaving it off. So next up, we've got our mod envelope and mod depth. So what we're going to do here, we'll dial in a quick filter envelope to show you how that works right on the front panel. No menu diving allowed, actually. No menu diving whatsoever in the synth, but that's how the envelope works. You can just send it to the filter. And then for the mod depth, we've got our 1 LFO here. Which the LFO is going to be a classic analog LFO, which means it can go well into the audio rates. If you want to get some of that lo-fi distorted sound. I would say that is a minor gripe of mine, is that the range of the LFO, almost all of it is going to be audio rate. If we watch how this blue button is clicking here. So we have our incredibly slow, basically it's off, something insane like 15 seconds. Then the LFO starts to turn on. You've got slow, 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 fast. And just like that, it's in audio rate now, right? So you really only have this little window to play with, and it makes it not very musical, to be honest. It's not the best LFO. If I'm going to be using an LFO patch with this, I'll probably send it through my Moog Matriarch and use the LFOs there, because I find they're much better. But it is there. It's an LFO on a budget synth, a fully analog LFO that can allow for some really cool distorted audio rate sounds with that almost bit crush style vibe. All right, so we can also key sync that as well. For what it's worth, and the shapes are variable between sine wave, triangle, saw, square, and reverse saw rather. Cool. All right, so moving on here, we've got our 2 envelopes. So really impressed that Behringer managed to add 2 envelopes here. A lot of synths that are much more expensive than this, that are going for the full analog signal path, such as the Moog Grandmother, for example, they're going to only have 1 envelope, which is going to have to be shared between the amplitude and the filter cutoff. And that is a really big disadvantage compared to something like the Neutron, because you really do need 2 separate envelopes to make a lot of really classic bass sounds, lead sounds. So here we have full independent control over our ADSR for our amplitude. Of course, it is paraphonic, so the 2 oscillators share 1 envelope. And then we also have, as noted earlier, we have our separate envelope for the filter. It's good stuff. I really do like the envelopes here. They're snappy. They sound great for making kick drums, which we'll check out later. And they're good stuff. They're high quality analog envelopes. I'm a fan for sure. Okay, moving on here, we've got a noise generator. So if you do want to just have a purely noise-based patch, you are going to have to get into the Patchbay. Like I mentioned, that is one small disadvantage of not having a mixer, but still, you know what? It's a great sounding noise source. I'm glad that they went with a kind of classic white noise rather than what you hear in a lot of synths, which is this really boomy, bassy, almost pink noise style of sound. And this white noise is very usable. Sounds great for hi-hats. Sounds great for almost any type of crispy pluck that you want to add a bit of noise in for. It's just it didn't need to be there on a synth this price, and I'm glad they added it. It's awesome. And then finally, we have something called VCA bias, which is just going to open up the amplitude of the VCA here. Really great if you want to design patches on the fly. This is also how I use the Neutron to be controlled through my Moog matriarch. Well, like I mentioned, I'll run the Neutron with a MIDI cable like this into the instrument in of the Moog matriarch, and then I'll run that through the Moog filter and the Moog LFOs to get kind of a hybrid sound between Behringer and Moog for some basses. It's a cool addition that you can just open up the VCA so easily on the front panel without any menu diving. Okay, cool. So moving on. We've got our effects section here. So the delay is really interesting. I would say it's hard to use it musically in my genre of music, but nevertheless, I love it and I'm so happy it's here. So if you listen, let's turn down the release. It's a very lo-fi analog monophonic delay. Can almost get it sounding like a spring reverb. Again, many synths that are much more expensive than this don't have a built-in analog delay. You can tell it's a little bit noisy, but honestly, that adds to the charm of it. It's a unique effect. I will be honest with you guys, because you guys are, you're looking for an honest review. I have never used this analog delay on any of my Miles Away songs. It's just way too unpredictable and adds much too much noise into the kinds of sounds I like to make. But I guarantee you there's going to be some folks who this kind of delay, this kind of lo-fi delay will work perfectly with their music. Fun fact, you can also kind of get some cool drones going by turning up the feedback. Very chill. All right, cool. And then moving on, really the star of the show here, and probably along with the filter, the single thing that I'd say justifies the price of this synthesizer as almost a no-brainer if you're looking to dive in with a cheap analog synth, the analog distortion circuit. Not only does it just add a ton of gain and allow for tone control like we saw before, but it really adds what I feel is a very necessary punch to a lot of sounds. So when I make a couple of sounds later, I'm going to show you guys what I mean, but what I almost find is just goes without saying tip if you own a Neutron. Put the drive at least to about, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I find your sounds will always sound better, fatter, punchier, more professional. The Neutron drive is really awesome, and it makes up for the fact that there's no mixer, because usually I'd like to drive the oscillators into the mixer, but with the Neutron drive, you can kind of get that same effect, that mini Moog style driven oscillator effect, just you're doing it after the filter. A great thing to do with this if you want to create screaming bass lines, and probably the single thing I use the Neutron the most for in my songs, is if you're going to drive the resonant filter of two saw waves together beating off of each other into a highly distorted overdrive patch. So let's check out what that sounds like here. I'll do is I'll sample a note like this that sounds badass. And then what I'll do is I'll add that to a sampler instrument within Logic, and I'll have that as a layer that goes underneath my lead sound and over top of my sub bass. And the aggression is just unreal. It'll just add so much energy to your tracks. It's just pure electricity, analog synthesis, just distorting and exploding within the synthesizer. It's a really awesome distortion. I really will recommend you guys, if you do have the Neutron, try to always use a little bit of the overdrive within your sound there. Finally, we have some features for patching, including the sample and hold function, the slew rate limiter, and the 2 attenuators. We are going to get into those in our patching section. All right, let's go. Awesome. So we've got our cables here that are included with the Neutron. So with the Neutron, the patch bay is laid out all on the side. So that is one thing to keep in mind. I wouldn't say it's quite as intuitive as something like the Moog Grandmother, where you are going to be able to have, you know, the patch bay over top of each knob, and you can kind of naturally see what the signal flow looks like. That is probably a better tool for learning synthesis. But if you're the type who likes to read manuals, like to watch tutorials online, which I'm sure you are if you're watching my tutorial, remember to hit like, by the way, thank you. Then you'll probably enjoy this type of synth, because there's a lot you can do with the patch bay that really just makes it stand out relative to its peers here. So we'll just do a couple examples here, some simple ones that I find will hopefully demonstrate the extent of what we can do. So to start off, we'll create a kick drum. So what we're going to do here, we're going to go to our sine wave. Sine wave on this thing is awesome. So we're just going to grab a quick repeated sine wave. Grab some release. And then what we're going to do here, we're going to patch the pitch envelope together. So we're going to patch out of the envelope. And then we're going to patch into one of our attenuators. So if you guys remember from my Moog Matriarch video, an attenuator is something that's going to allow me to tone down the amount of modulation from something like an envelope or an oscillator or an LFO to make it less intense. So we're going to do that right now to get that pitch modulation on the kick drum just right. Then out from the attenuator. And into the pitch of oscillator 1. Now, as we can hear, way too much. So now we've gotten rid of it entirely, and we'll turn it up little by little. And then we're going to turn down the attack, turn down the sustain, starting to get a kick drum sound. Turn it up as necessary. You can turn off our looper here. That's already a sick sounding kick drum. So turn up some drive. You want a hard style kick? Not quite, but you get the idea. But yeah, just a little bit of drive. Turn up the filter to modulate it in the same way as it's doing the pitch. Not bad. There you go. A kick drum really quickly and a good use of the attenuator. So the patch bay is very logically laid out. It just takes a little bit of time to learn, but if you're able to learn the patch bay, it's a great little way to get the Neutron going. So one more thing we're going to use the patch bay for right here is we're going to use it to route the LFO to pulse width modulation, because that is one of my favorite things to do. If you've watched any of my videos before, you know I love using pulse width modulation on leads, on basses. So again, what we're going to do here, we're going to go out of the LFO this time instead of the envelope. So LFO out, and then into the attenuator. And then from the attenuator out. And then we're going to go from the attenuator 1 into the width of oscillator 1. You can tell it's already going like crazy here. So we'll turn off the attenuator, dial in the sound we like first. Let's do some of the delay. Slowly dial it up. Right, so what might have been lacking on the front panel, you initially assumed, okay, you know, there's no easy way to modulate the pulse width, or you have to use the LFO just to do that. No, you can still use your LFO for filter. And it's nice and easy to get complicated or simple modulations. This one's pretty simple in just like that. Probably, if I were to break down pros and cons of this synth, so firstly, the pros, the sound, absolutely, for the price, it sounds absolutely great. The filter, really amazing filter for the price. The oscillator section, again, you're getting 2 analog VCOs that are variable wave shape, amazing stuff here. And the overdrive is another highlight. Finally, the fact that it has 2 attenuators makes this a great entry point into Eurorack, because an attenuator alone will probably cost you at least $100 in Eurorack. So adding in 2 in a synth like this already almost justifies the price of it. Finally, on the con side, so I do find this synth is very noisy, especially when I use it with USB MIDI. It's one of the noisiest synths that I have, and it does make it a little bit hard to use in clean modern music sometimes. Although there is a way when there's a will, right? You can roll off some of the noise with a high pass filter. I also find as a con, the paraphonic mode is a nice addition, but you do have to do a fair amount of menu diving to change the note priority mode to make it a little bit more usable. So I do wish that maybe there was one more button that you could cycle through that showed different note priority modes or whatnot. And then finally, as a con, I would just say that the delay, I kind of almost wish that they had taken it out and maybe left 3 more knobs that were more modulation or something else additional, or even a simple mixer in there, because frankly speaking, for my type of music, I'm never going to use this delay. Overall though, guys, this is a really great synth. It's super versatile. It's amazing for the price. I think what Behringer are doing by making this synth so affordable, and there are other synths like it, but this one in particular, because it is the most unique of their synths, it's not a remake, it's not a rehash of something, by making a synth that's this affordable, that's pure analog, it's really incentivizing a lot of people to get into the analog synthesis world, to get into the hardware world, which I think is so great. So yeah, guys, that's the end of the review. So I will finalize this by saying I am actually going to be selling my Neutron. The reason why is that I do love this synth, but it just doesn't fit as well into my workflow as some of my other synths. And the sound, while I love it, it's great, I do feel it's suited for other types of music. I wanted to make sure I got a review out there still though, because it is a fantastic synth and I highly recommend it. If you like the way it sounds and you like the idea of working with the Patchbay and learning, you will 100% like this synth. It is a steal for the money. Thanks as always for watching, guys. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and I will see you in the next video.